I'm going to talk now about the second William in my family, whose tragic but courageous story has always inspired me. William Robinson landed in Fremantle nearly 200 years ago in a rowing boat. He landed with his mother and 4 siblings, all of whom were younger than him, including a baby still being breastfed. And here is the difficulty. There was no dad, because they'd come out to Australia as pioneers to start a family or to work. William himself was the father was a vet, lived near the Ascot racecourse. I think he worked as a vet on the ship, partly to pay their fare, but he developed a wound. I'm not sure whether a horse kicked him but he got a wound, it got septic, and he died of sepsis. This is, of course, 150 years before antibiotics were developed. He was buried at sea, and you can imagine how his wife and his 5 children felt as they buried him at sea. And you can imagine how William, at the age of 12, felt when he landed at Bathers Beach in Fremantle. And I'm imagining him sitting on a rowing boat after his mother and the other 4 kids have been taken ashore, thinking about, what am I going to do? In that generation, and certainly in my father's generation, the older son was always told to look after the ladies in the family. Sort of patriarchal, but also quite gallant. And when my dad got sick, he said to me, "You're the older," I was just a teenager as well, "you're the oldest son, you need to look after your mother and your sister." So when he landed, I just imagine how he felt. And it was February, the middle of an Australian summer with flies, things that they would never have experienced back in England. And his mother, Margaret Maria, she's one of my heroes as well. But I just want to talk about William because I bear his middle name. He worked a bit in Fremantle, and then he got married to Charlotte, and they had their own kids and started their own farm, cut down the trees, cleared the land. And I'm glad to say they had good relationships with the local Indigenous people. That's been well described elsewhere. They started this farm, built the farmhouse. The farmhouse housed ultimately many generations of that family, right up to my dad, who grew up there. But they lost the farm in the Great Depression, and Dad and his family came when he was, I think, about 10 or 12 to the city. And that was the end of the family connection to that farm, although the main street of the town that was ultimately formed around that original farmhouse is called Robinson Street, and the town is called Brookton. I admire William because, again, with all of that terrible start, he could have been permanently bitter and sat in a corner and basically felt sorry for himself. All of those pioneers are my heroes because, number one, they had no antibiotics. I mean, as a doctor, I can't imagine a life where you had no effective treatments for people. And not surprisingly, about 1/3 of all children died. Can you imagine? I imagine his mother and him walking. Well, they actually did better than most, but in general, I imagine the pioneer mothers and oldest children, etc., walking out to the hen house to get eggs for breakfast in the morning and walking past about 3 or 4 tiny graves. How the hell did they deal with that suffering? I have 3 wonderful children, and if any of them had died, it would have absolutely gutted me and my wife. Absolutely. The worst thing that could happen. And so I admire the courage of these people, the courage of William, my great-great-great-grandfather, or I don't know how many greats actually. And I'll finish by saying, in order to help my grandchildren, I have taken my 2 oldest girls down to the very spot where he landed on his rowboat, and I've said, can you imagine how he felt? I mean, he was your age. Imagine how you would feel if you went to a strange land, strange weather, and your dad had died at sea and you were all alone. I do this to help them build their personal resilience, and I'll remind them again and again, because in remembering the stories of courage from anybody, but particularly those in your bloodline, it helps to develop children's resistance. Such a vital thing in life today.